Hello, YouTubers, and welcome back to another episode of Freedom Friday here on the Ohio Patriot Education Network YouTube channel. I'm also your host here at the Ohio Patriot. For today's episode, we are going to talk about hero Jordan Salinas, the man who stopped the Idaho Falls In-N-Out burger shooting recently, as well as why we need the Armed Citizens Qualified Immunity Act of 2026 immediately, so that any future heroes that would be like Jordan would basically have the same privileges that cops get on a regular basis in this country. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the difference between ARs and AKs today, specifically when it comes to any kind of grid down situation and what you'd want to have versus what you might have currently is what it is there. We'll also discuss the benefits and risks as to how both these kind of rifles is what it is. We will also be discussing why technically, depending on various state gun laws, you should be potentially carrying either an AR pistol or an AR rifle with you at all times nowadays, is what it is, in your vehicle. And basically, just going down the line of different things here, what it is then. So, who is Jordan Salinas? Jordan Salinas, as far as I can gather and from everything I've heard now, was a random bystander who there was a massacre, I believe it was someplace in Idaho back in 2021 at some mall. And I've heard various things about this dude, actually. I don't know if the one is true or not, but there was also talk that his brother apparently is disabled in a wheelchair. And that was one of the main reasons why he went and got his concealed carry license, became a gunner, et cetera, there, and was training to basically stop massacres in the future. There is also, obviously from his own words, what was going on that day is what it is. Then you have everything that people have figured out about him now is what it is. Obviously, he goes by Poverty Operator here on YouTube is what it is. So I'm sure we'll hear more about this man in the coming days and weeks is what it is right now. And surprisingly, in the last couple of days, it was ABC News actually gave a legit pro-gun interview for the first time, it seems like ever, in this country, which is basically they sat down with this man and let him basically tell his story. And yeah, he told it like it was. He mentioned how, I don't know what my internet is going on with this right now. Could be that the maintenance guys are doing various, I don't know if they were doing something in my neighbor lady's unit, but they go here, it sounded like they were hammering something into place either behind me or on the unit caddy corner from me is what it is there. Because I'm pretty sure my neighbor kid Mickey moved out is what it was then. So I'm not sure if they were hammering in like new cabinets in his place or if it were for the new people that are going to be coming in at some point in the future here, or if they were doing something to repair something over here is what it is. But either way, it's very annoying. That's why I didn't start. I was going to start about 15 minutes ago, actually, and that's the reason I didn't start was because there was a bunch of hammering noises what it was then behind me. So yeah, it is what it is. But anyway, so going back to Jordan Salinas, though, my understanding is everything that we've gathered and everything a lot of pro people have gathered now is what it is that the dude basically started training like 5 years ago is what it was then, to stop any kind of future thing that happened there in Idaho is what it was then that he would be around. And thankfully he was in the right place, right time. And so was an off-duty cop for that matter. We still don't know what that off-duty cop's name is, which I'm surprised by that. You would think that person would also kind of want recognition at this point. So, you basically had two different guys that stepped up there is what it was. And from everything I've been reading about here in the last couple of days, and we'll go over some different articles here from the mainstream media is what it is then in a little bit. But yeah, from every single thing I've basically heard and seen and stuff like that, it was various people doing various things. So okay. Yeah, so they might be doing stuff in various things. Yeah, it's my neighbor lady. She apparently is listening in on my stream here is what it is. Whatever. But anyway, so yeah, so this Jordan guy, he basically was at In-N-Out. This apparently it's In-N-Out that was there in Idaho. They had they were only open for like a week before this whole thing happened or whatever. And there's been various theories being thrown out there too, that like, because my understand, like, I don't know truly if now it's a Christian restaurant or not, like um, Chick-fil-A is, but there's been talk that it was potentially like something like that's what it is, and that's why this kid that did this was trying to get like, claim to fame or whatever, doing that or whatever. Who knows? There's been no motive that's actually been released yet, because obviously this piece of crap, like most of these, mentally deranged nutters that do these kind of things, he basically opted out as soon as he was confronted by armed, resistance is what it is there. So you basically have just a bunch of stuff going on there is what it is. And the sad part of the matter is that you have this dude who, it's interesting to me when it comes to the mainstream media, like how they try to vilify AR-15s or just AR platform rifles and stuff like that's what it is there, because that's what they claim that this guy had. But then I was looking at like the video footage of the actual shooting as it occurred and stuff, and I have no idea what the fucking weird ass like hillbilly concoction this dude put together was, because to me what it looked like almost was like it was basically like a bare bones thing where it was a barrel of a rifle with no handguard over it. And you would think if you're going to make any kind of thing like that, you would have like the handguard, just because obviously if your hand's wrapped directly around a barrel, it's going to get hot and it's going to burn you is what it is. So it's just like, it made no sense, honestly, unless it was just a bad, like, I think it might have been like a cropped picture, or not cropped picture, but it was like a, what do you call it now? Like a still frame or something somebody took. Something that just looked retarded, basically. But yeah, it just kind of sucks either way, because it'd be nice to know exactly like what this dude actually was using, if he like just made some shit is what it is, because it kind of it realized like he just like made something random is what it is, or it'd be like, I don't want to say like 3D printed a gun basically, but I mean he might have done that even for that matter, who knows. And then just like had like various parts but not everything he needed or whatever to make it, so he just basically went on this thing where it was there. But this, it doesn't matter, that person is gone from this earth. Thank God for that, and thank God people like Jordan Salinas is what it is there, because they were able to do what they needed to do to take out the trash in the society is what it is there. And that's the one nice thing that we saw from USA Today. There was somebody did an opinion piece article there, which actually has been an article period that was talking about how they sorry, my mic just took a weird shit on me for a sec there. Yeah, this Nicole woman was saying, how'd she say it here now? She was saying Idaho shooting proves we need more heroes, not gun laws. And that's true, by the way, because that's the thing. Like, you look at what this place was, just like almost every single place that one of these massacres happens, it was a gun-free zone, you know? And I've talked about this ad nauseum for, what is it now? 4 years, almost 5 years now, in various cases, where I've discussed that about how none of these, like all these places, are just gun-free kill zones is what it is. Like none of them actually prevent anything. And this is what bothers me so much when you have different places basically creating a hotspot for people to basically be killed in. Because that's one thing I wanted to discuss today as well, was there is a thing here in Ohio called First Friday, and there's also some different cities and stuff like that do a thing called Second Fridays, what it is there, where it's basically a gathering of some kind, where it's like various people get together, and like I think there's like some food trucks that show up to these things, and I believe it's like what do you call it now? Like some people will like have like tables and stuff to like sell things and stuff to use what it is there. But the one that they're doing in downtown Canton tonight is one that's been around for a while now. And instead of actually dealing with the real problems that the Canton cops are not dealing with, which is basically the criminality in the city, specifically of minority youth that is the ones doing like, repeat offending stuff is what it is there. They're instead making some stupid shit like this right here, which we're going to talk about here in a sec, and then we'll shift back to the Jordan topic is what it is then. So it was Know Before You Go, August 7th, Hall of Fame, first week, first Friday. Centennial Plaza will be gated like a concert event, and all guests must go through security to enter. First Friday is still free, no tickets required. Restrictions inside the gated area will be similar to a concert, including no weapons or coolers. Unaccompanied minors will not be permitted inside the gated area. All minors must be accompanied by a parent, guardian, or adult. As a reminder, the DORA curfew, which I had to look up what the hell the DORA thing was to begin with, for all minors is 9 p.m. The citywide curfew, to include the parade route, is 11 p.m. Curfew will be strictly enforced to include citations to parents. So apparently the DORA thing this is something that they're making now called DORA areas for these events, which is basically, if you guys might remember when we were growing up as kids and stuff like that, you would have like fairs and festivals that would have like a beer garden area in them is what it is. And it would be like essentially you'd have like this stand where it was like just a beer stand essentially, or like a trailer that like sold beer, whatever it was, or something, or some kind of, or I don't know if it was just beer, or if it was like you might be able to get like shots or something then too, which I think some of that's what's going on at this place too, if I'm not mistaken, is there's going to be various different vendors like that where it's like there's going to be some that are like craft brewers and stuff like that. But then there's going to be some that are just like where you can just like do like various like flavored alcohols or something is what it is then. And so that's basically what they're calling DORA zones, where the A stands for alcohol. I'm not sure what the DOR stands for is what it is though. But it's just so stupid is what it is. And it's nothing more than a way to infringe on Second Amendment rights in this country is what it is then. Because as some people pointed out, they're like, okay, you're going to have these gated areas. Are these gates and fences that you're temporarily erecting around this place going to be magically bulletproof for this event? And that's the truth of the matter, because it's like they're not going to be. And all you're going to have is people potentially being disarmed at the gate is what it is there. And now being in a fucking kill zone where you're going to have like maybe like 4 to 6 cops spread out through like this several mile area. And you're going to have a bunch of fucking YNs, etc. there that want to do criminal shit. All they got to do then is do fucking drive-bys on the area is what it is then, dude. And they're going to be able to get probably a pretty good count is what it is. And it's so fucking dumb because it's like all you're doing is disabling people like a Jordan Salinas from being able to shoot back is what it is then. And it just bothers the hell out of me, honestly, dude, on every aspect of the whole thing, because it's like, this is exactly why I don't go to these events is what it is. This is like why I don't go to events at all for that matter, where it have to disarm is what it is then, because why would I disarm myself in a society that you have a bunch of activists trying to be judges these days? They are actively going around and giving repeat violent offenders slaps on the wrist and letting them back out on the streets again to then be a bunch of murderers and stuff like that. Or you have these young punk asses that instead of their parents actually dealing with them before they go down the road of, criminality and like career criminal behavior and stuff like that and do gangbanger shit, instead of catching them before that, it's like, oh no, they'll just let them run wild, basically is what it is there. And this is why I feel like we definitely, as a society, need to start charging these parents that are allowing this shit to go down is what it is then. Because, we've already kind of seen this in some aspects with, there was that one kid in, I want to say it was Georgia, but I could be wrong about the state. It was one of these states where it was the kid's dumbass father basically buying him a gun instead of actually dealing with his mental issues, what it is then. And then the kid went to his high school and went on a small killing spree, is what it is then. And rightfully so, the father in that situation recently was tried with, I believe it was like either 10 or 15 years in prison as an accessory. I forget if it was before or after I think it was accessory charges, but I think it was also something else on the top of that's what it is then. but it was basically him being, instrumental in why his son was able to go kill people as what it is then. And I'm not saying that an aspect is kind of the same thing with the black community, because the problem there is it seems like a lot of these kids will go and join gangs and stuff like that is what it is then. And then they'll either, break into a car that somebody left a gun and they'll steal that gun, or it's something where, they'll join 4, 5, 6 other people and go break into a gun shop and then steal just a bunch of guns is what it is then. And then, of course, they'll take one of them for themselves, and then, everything else basically goes to other people, or they'll sell them off to like other gangbanger types is what it is then. And so the parents themselves in that situation, in many cases, it's a lot of single mothers and fatherless homes is what it is. I'm not saying that's exclusively that way, but it's more than it needs to be, honestly. And the issue there is that you have these young kids that their mothers who, might be working 2 jobs just to support them and keep roof over their heads and stuff like that's what it is there. Don't even realize that they have this illegal firearm on them is what it is then, because they don't have the time to parent them is what it is. And that's the biggest problem with, these deadbeat dads in these ghettos in our country is what it is there, because they don't want to step up and actually be fathers to their children. And so you don't have a 2-parent household to where, you could actually have a decent, potentially decent father in the household is what it is there. I'm not saying every single one of these guys is going to be a decent guy, because most of them are shitbags. Is why they run for the hills as soon as the woman tells them they're pregnant is what it is there. It's also why when you look at the black community in this country, you have a 50-50 chance of literally making out alive from the womb, which is just insane, honestly. There was actually a video I saw the other day where it was this girl talking about Gen Z to a bunch of kids that were either around Gen Z age, or maybe they were like just under that age. So it would have been like, I'm trying to think what the actual Gen Z time frame is right now. I think it's up to like 18 or 19 or something like that's what it is then. And so you would have these voting age kids, what it is there, that they were all talking with. And they're like, oh, what do you think the number one contributor to Gen Z deaths is? And like a couple people are like, oh, it's gun violence, or it's, gang violence. And then a bunch of people are like, oh, it's drugs and this or that or the other thing is what it is there. And this woman's like, oh, no, it's abortion. So you've had a third of the kids that should have been born in Gen Z literally wiped off the planet in the womb at places like Planned Parenthood, et cetera. There's what it is. And it's just fucking insane is what it is, dude. But you'll still have these, moms doing action types, et cetera, there that will bitch, moan, babble on, et cetera, about how the guns, objects are the problem, and not people pulling triggers what it is then. Because if they actually were to bring up the real shit there, they would look very, very racist is what it is. Even though it's you just seeing pattern recognition is what it is there. And when you recognize the patterns and you see who's committing the crime is what it is there, you understand that, yes, it does facilitate back to this one particular group of people is what it is there. So it's a whole thing. But and a lot of it, I believe, does have to do with IQ is what it is. That's one thing I have been doing a lot of research on the past few years now, is it seems like there's definitely IQ factors when it comes to the rise of criminality, especially in the black community is what it is there. So anyway, but the entire point of the matter is it's bullshit that you have these cities that are trying to enforce unjust laws onto everyday citizenry when they could just simply start arresting these criminals out of the society is what it is there. And you would actually have prosecutors that were willing to prosecute these fucking people for the various crimes they're committing and keep them locked the fuck up is what it is then. And this is what I've said many, many times in the past. We need 1 strike laws. We need 3 strike laws, 1 strike laws obviously would be for the most violent offenders, the murderers, the rapists, the child molesters, et cetera there. And then the 3 strike laws would be 3 various felonies of, Doesn't really matter what you're doing, honestly. It could be you stealing a bunch of money from elderly people. It could be you know, you want to rob a bank at gunpoint. It could be you carjacking people with a firearm or something like that, or just strong arm robbing people and stuff like that. It just depends. So, but yeah, the one thing I have talked about quite a bit in the past, and I'll talk about it again now, because this is one thing that does seem to be rising up across the board when it comes to people that hear about it. And it's the 94 crime bill that used to exist back in 1994 there. Now, granted, did that in some cases overcharge for various small shit? Yes, it did. And I think that was the problem back then, is you had people having like a dime bag of weed and getting like 20 years to life or something for that, which is just ridiculous, honestly. Because that was like obviously way over criminal charging. However, that also led to a time period in history where you had a lot of people that, because they were overcharged, that maybe they would have got back out and done more serious crimes, were still in a prison cell then, as it was. And whether it be a federal prison cell, whether it be a state prison cell, doesn't matter, honestly. It was that they were in a prison cell and they weren't able to go out there and do more crime, is what it is, which is the exact opposite of what we're seeing now, when you have these people who are doing a bunch of bullshit and being let out with a slap on the wrist, is what it is then, whether it be because the judge is doing race-based crap, is what it is, or something else for that matter, and giving these people a second chance or a third chance or an eighth chance, whatever it is. Like there was one recently, I think it was in, I want to say Chicago, but it might have been in a different city actually, where the dude in question was just a violent piece of shit criminal completely. The judge was like, "Oh, I feel like you can totally be rehabilitated, or whatever the case be." While she is saying this, the dude is literally in front of her, cursing her out and is telling her, like, "No, I can't be. You might as well just lock me the fuck up." And yet she gave him a lenient sentence. And it's like, at what point do you just disbar that judge? Like, at what point do you disbar that person? And then you also charge them with any future crimes that individual they're letting out commits after that, is what it is then. So I think that's the biggest problem we have right now, honestly, is that you have these, like I said, these actors trying to be judges, what it is there, who are pushing all this bullshit. And because they're pushing all this bullshit, they are allowing these violent super felons back on the street who, in a lot of cases, should have been executed out of our society, what it is then, for the crimes they committed previous to that, is what it is then. And then you keep having a different judge, or different judge, and it's like 5, 6, 7 judges will keep letting this person back out. And it's like, dude, at what point do you not understand that this person is like clearly just evil, that they just need to be like taken off the board completely, is what it is there. And that's exactly, what we're seeing now with some of these things. That's exactly why you have heroes like Jordan Salinas stopping massacres from, being bigger massacres than they could have been. Because that's the thing. Had there been nobody armed there that day, that could have turned into some crazy shit. I mean, this crazy motherfucker that was doing that, he was literally walking through the freaking drive-through and just like shooting the car windows and shit, dude. And this is exactly, well, remember his victims and not the piece of shit that was the killer, is what it is here, which is what we're going to talk about right now. And you had, so far, there's been 3 people that have died from this shooting. I believe there was 6 or 7 others wounded still. I believe there's at least 1 more in critical condition right now, is what it is. But the ones who actually died in this, it is very tragic, because at least one of these people had their entire life ahead of them. The others involved in the situation that were killed were just good people, is what it is there, at least from everything it sounds like. So you had Ashley Garibay, who was 23 years old, originally from Stockton, California. She was the worker in and out that was killed there. She had her entire life ahead of her. You had this Dale Schwartz guy who was 66 from Salt Lake City, Utah. This dude was a, I believe, Air Force veteran some kind of an artist, and then a beloved husband, which I assume he also maybe had kids, but I'm not sure on that one. And then you had the third guy who was or the third person in this who was another guy named Christopher Kloch. I think is how you pronounce his name. It's like a launch with the C, so it'd be like Kloch. Yeah, it's like Kloch or Clanch, something like that. Who was 59, and he was from Idaho there. The thing with this guy was, from my understanding, this Chris guy, he actually was legitimately a how do you call people now? Like a rehab dude that helped people with addiction and recoveries and stuff like that. And he himself, I believe, was a recovering addict over the decades that it was then. And that's why he was in that line of work. So yeah, you have like three different people who were taken off the board over nothing, over senseless violence as it is there, just because some piece of shit had like a bad day or whatever it was, and decided to go just like murder a bunch of innocent people is what it is then. So it's just so fucked up is what it is, man. And this is exactly what the problem is with our society, and what happens when you have all these politicians listening to these moron anti-gunner groups to push a bunch of bullshit like the various gun-free zones that exist out there is what it is. And, you know, when there's statistical facts being proven that I think it's 97.8% or something like that of all these massacres take place in the gun-free zone, like, I don't know, maybe stop having gun-free kill zones as it is across the country, you know? And this is exactly what we, like I said, we need to actually institute the Armed Citizen Qualified Immunity Act of 2026 across the board nationwide is what it is there, which basically is exactly what it sounds like. You would have exactly what we give to cops every single day for qualified immunity is exactly what would expand to the citizenry. As long as you are a legally armed person who can actually, you know, is not a convicted felon, has the right to own guns, et cetera, there. As long as you can legally have that gun, if you were able to stop a massacre in this country, you should never have to face any kind of criminal charges or any kind of civil litigation or anything like that. Is what it is there. You should be covered, is what it is, because it's absolutely fucking ridiculous to turn a potential victim into the bad guy in that situation when the bad guy was the person who was trying to kill that person and everybody else around them, but happened to be stopped by that person. In this case, in the in-and-out situation, in the in-and-out shooting, it was Jordan Salinas that, you know, took this piece of shit criminal's life is what it is there. So anyway, moving on to the debate I wanted to talk about earlier, though, with the AK versus AR thing is what it is there. So I found a thing on Discord, I believe it was yesterday, and then I went and, you know, I posted it on the on our X page there last night as it was, which originally it was kind of me trolling a little bit. It was me joking around. Obviously, I should have probably just put like a JK in there is what it is. But yeah, it was basically about like, you know, the silliness of AKs is what it is or whatever. And it's funny because the dude who originally posted it a couple days ago, then followed us and was basically trying to get into it with myself and some of the other people that have access to the account there is what it is last night. And I'm not sure if he was actually trying to troll back or whatever, or if he was just kind of just being like one of these guys basically what it is there. Because he brought up an interesting statistic, which is basically about how there's about 500,000 AK owners in America. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And I decided to do a little, you know, little research. And after that, and I was like, okay, so how many actual AR owners are there is what it is. And so from all the data I could find and can figure out, that's what it is there. There is somewhere between 16 and 24.5-ish million Americans who own some type of AR platform firearm, whether it be an AR-15, whether it be an AR-10, doesn't really matter, honestly. But yeah, they own some kind of rifle in the AR patterns is what it is there. And so, rightfully I, made the post back to that dude and I was like, okay, like given that, the last thing that you want to be in any kind of grid down, any kind of shit as a fan situation there is the AK guy in a group of like, 10, 15, 20 people where the other, 9, 14, or 24 of them have ARs, all of which obviously would be chambered in like 5.56, 2-3 wild when it is there. And they would all be able to have mag compatibility and ammo compatibility is what it is there. And so, because of that whole thing, the issue there, obviously, and I want to bring up specifically for one main reason. I remember a couple years back now, and I want to say it was around maybe 2023, but it could have been all the way back to like 2021. It was some event that was going on it was down there in the Columbus area, and I want to say it was like a drag show at church or something, maybe like an all ages drag show or something like that. Which, why the fuck you'd have an all ages drag show at number one, an actual church is fucking ridiculous. Number two, why you would be doing literal drag shows for children, unless you are a legit pedophile, is what it is there. And why you would support that shit, again, unless you are a pedophile or pedophile enabler, is what it is there. So, yeah, just very suspicious in general. But the whole thing is, there was a group of guys that were there that day who, it was probably about maybe, I want to say somewhere between like 8 and 10 deep, give or take, maybe. Like it was a small group of dudes, but they were still like, it was like an armed, like full, they were all in full kit and everything like that is what it is there. And one thing I noticed back then that, because of my autism and stuff like that, this kind of thing seared in my mind is what it is there from my memory. You had all but one of them have some kind of an AR, and then there was one fucking guy walking around with some kind of an AK variant. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, okay, so let's say shit does kick off there. How fucked is that guy in that firefight? And the answer is extremely, because you think about it, your basic kit for your loadout there is usually like 7 mags. So you're talking about, give or take 210 rounds. Most people don't go over that, is what it is there. The issue with being the AK guy in a grid down situation there is your ability to run dry very quickly, because you potentially are going to expend more or less all that ammo, maybe even a little bit more than that, in some kind of a firefight is what it is there, depending on how long the firefight goes for, obviously. So you're going to burn through that 210 rounds, and then you're just going to be fucked. You're either going to have to pick up something off the battlefield at that point that one of the enemy combatants dropped, or you have to have somebody basically have like a secondary weapon on them to like hand you, and then you're going down to like a pistol or something that is there. So, or you get on your own pistol, obviously, which is most likely because you're all going to have something. Well, I guess is what I would say on that one is, unless you have somebody carrying like a shotgun or an extra AR on them, is what it is what I'm thinking offhand. Like you're not going to have that rifle ability anymore. You're going to have to get on to a less accurate firearm, being the handgun is what it is there. Because, people have talked about that in the past, and I'll talk about it now, honestly. There's a good rule of thumb, which is basically your pistol should always be used to get to your rifle, because your rifle should be your main weapon, especially in some kind of a firefight or prolonged firefight, especially in a grid down situations what it is there. And so, yeah, unless you're going to be the guy who's, walking around with some heavy ass backpack because it's got like 30 extra fucking AK mags in or something like that, like pretty sure you're not going to be walking around with an AK when things go south. You're going to be grabbing an AR of some kind, or you're going to be hitting an AR of some kind is what it is there. Which, there was a time period where I do believe, and this was like 20 something years ago now is what it is, where AKs were king. And I had this talk with G-Webs years ago, is what it was, where he was discussing it with me, because I believe it was right after the Sultan's ban in 94 was lifted from its 10-year clause, or is what it is in 2004 then, to where we could actually have, ARs, AKs, etc. back in civilian hands again, which, by the way, I want to point something out with that whole thing. Nobody realized, a lot of people don't realize this, or really, I don't know if it's nobody realizes it, but a lot of people don't realize it. Back during that time period, there were gun rights people who were trying to lawsuit the federal government at the time to basically deem the assault as being in 1994 unconstitutional, because it was. The problem that happened there is you had, I don't know if it was like 10 or 15 or so lawsuits at the time then, like from like 94 to like 98 or so, give or take. And the problem there is you had a bunch of Bill Clinton appointed judges that were putting these federal judgeships and stuff like that. They knew damn well that the shit was unconstitutional, but instead of deeming it that way, they're like, oh, no, we're just going to go with the guy that appointed us here. And they let it fucking stand. They let knowingly unconstitutional shit stand because they knew it was going to be gone in a decade, instead of just striking it down immediately. And this is exactly what has led, 30-something years later now is what it is, to more unconstitutionality in a bunch of these leftist states like your Colorados and stuff like that now that are trying to basically bring back Jim Crow style permit to purchase laws and stuff like that for any American citizen that lives in that state, where you have to go through like this whole course. That's all, by the way, Bloomberg funded, Mama's Man Action, and Everytown created, et cetera, there. And then you have them switching to a situation where they know at some point it's going to be deemed unconstitutional, and then it's going to be, who knows how long that court case is going to take. It probably could take up to like 5 years, honestly, or more, before it's finally overturned. Because the problem is that all these circuit court judges, all these federal judges, all these various lower court judges are not abiding by the rulings the Supreme Court put in place with the Bruin decision that is hard line in the fucking sand. Yes, all of this shit is unconstitutional. Deem it as such and move the fuck on. Deem it as such, kick it out completely, and then move on is what it is then. So, yeah, it's just a bunch of BS is what it is then. So, yeah, it really does piss me off, honestly. And the issue there becomes, obviously, you got to have people take these to court battles and stuff like that. Not everybody can afford to sue, But thankfully, you do have gunners groups out there that are doing so. You have Firearms Policy Coalition, you have Gunners of America, et cetera, there. They're doing their jobs. And they're winning these battles over the time. It's just a matter of getting the stuff deemed unconstitutional, who it is then, and overturned in the court of law. But in the meantime, you basically have American citizens having their rights fucked over completely. And this is exactly what I've said many, many times in the past. This is why deprivation of rights under color of law needs to be a federal felony at this point in history. And it needs to be a federal felony of, you have two choices for sentencing: life imprisonment, death penalty, depending on the severity. In the case where you were taking down people's rights of an entire state, it needs to be death penalty at that point, dude. Because these motherfuckers that are doing this are such oath-breaking sacks of shit. There's no reason to be on this earth anymore, is what it is. And I guarantee, once you have a few of them being tried and given the death penalty for this shit, you're going to have the rest of them fall in fucking line real quick, and they'll either resign from office or they'll actually abide by the fucking constitutional oath they swore when they got into office to begin with, what it is there. So, anyway. And that would be one way to fix things very quickly, honestly, in our country. And I do believe, honestly, truthfully, like, I think in order to hold office, there really should be a requirement that you have to be a firearms owner in this country. Because how are you going to sit there and claim to be swearing an oath to the Constitution, Bill of Rights specifically, that includes the Second Amendment of not being infringed upon, when you yourself have never even gone through the process of buying a firearm in this country. Because I guarantee if these people actually knew the bullshit burdens they were putting on people, they would be like, wow, I am a fucking retard. And maybe they change their ways. Or maybe they resign from office, or maybe they wouldn't do anything because they're just done with frigging piece of shit is what it is then. And then they would have to be removed from office, by arrestable offenses is what it is like that. So anyway, but yeah, it's a bunch of shit. But going back to what I was saying about the AWB, that was what it is there. So it was around, I believe, 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. After it was lifted, you had a time period where we had import stuff coming into America. And there was all these different, this is all my understanding from talking with G-Webs over the years, though. Because he and I guess a bunch of buddies used to do this stuff all the time when it was then, where they would buy these different parts kits to make AKs is what it is there in the mid 2000s. And then they would go and have like basically build parties at somebody's place where they were all building different AKs out is what it is then. And this is back when you could buy these kits for like $400 or $500 or so, give or take. And of course, nowadays those same things would be like twice that price. Usually, is what it is. And that's one thing I've noticed recently here too, for that matter, because between the post 2020 prices of stuff, and then of course you have the Russia-Ukraine war continuing on for years now, is what it is. I'm not even sure how long that's been going on for. Like, what is it, 4 years, 5 years now, or something almost. I want to say it was around 2022 when that first started, maybe give or take. So it's been at least, I'd want to say 4 years anyway. You had the ammo supplies for 7.6239 dry up like a motherfucker real fast, is what it is. Because I was even looking at my local shop this morning about that, because I was trying to do a price comparison of 5.56 versus 7.62 is what it is then. And 7.62 is about twice the price of 5.56 right now, because the only thing you can get domestically is stuff like Hornady or some other company like that that's going to make that, because all the various Russian stuff, all the various Eastern European blocks of ammo manufacturers, all that ammo is now going into the Russia side of the war. It's going into the Ukrainian side of the war is what it is. And so now you have this ammo that back in the day you could go and buy like, pallets of freaking 7.62 for, a few $100s or whatever the case be. And now you're lucky if you can get, that same thing for like less than $1,000 or something. So that's another reason why at this point in history, AKs really are the inferior rifle to have, because you're paying more for the rifle on the front end and then you're paying more for the ammo on the back end, versus you can go out to any place right now and even just like a basic manufactured AR from like Ruger or Smith & Wesson or something like that, it's like $500-$600, and you can go and build one. I built many of them now for like $400 to $450 is what it is there, dude. So they can still be built for under $5. Like, obviously it's not going to be, the end all be all. You're not going to have like the lightest gun and the best of everything on there, like you're dealing defense ones that they charge like $2,000 for, whatever it is. Which I'm not saying those are like super light or anything like that, but and I'm not sure what even verifies that price on that company. I think the company itself is like made by like vets or something like that. Just want to make a profit is what it is there. So it goes back to the whole kind of capitalism thing, just being, exactly what the problem is for our country right now. Just to be clear, I'm not saying capitalism is a problem. I'm saying crony, CRONY version of it is, and that's where you have like a small elitist group of people, your globalist types, like people make up Bilderberg or people like Vivek Ramaswamy or any of these guys like that are able to be complete and total scumbags and screw over others and never go to prison for the crimes they commit to basically become billionaires is what it is there. So Yeah, it's all that shit basically is what I consider to be crony capitalism. Or it's like Michael Bloomberg, where, 30, 40, 50 years ago, dude was short selling stock, which in of itself should used to be a crime in this country, honestly, as far as I'm aware. And then, of course, enough politicians got paid off over the decades to where it then somehow didn't become a crime then. Um, but yeah, he was basically doing short selling a stock for decades of his life there. And that's how he was able to make his billions of dollars. And then when he became a billionaire, now all of a sudden he's all anti gun and shit and creating all these anti gun versus what is there. So, but anywho, the entire point of the matter is you have all that stuff being a problem. And if we actually had true capitalism in this country, we would have a much better nation overall, is what it is then. Because you wouldn't have all the scumbaggery, you wouldn't have all the private equity firms being able to buy up everybody's shit and then triple the price of everything, is what it is there. Whether it be housing or whether it be, like I think it was BlackRock bought out Uber a few years back now. And what used to be like a $10 or $20 Uber ride is now like $100 something or more, which is ridiculous as it is. So yeah, it's just completely insane. But anyway, the entire point of the matter is it's just a bunch of fuckery all across the board. Fucking clown down the road coming up there and thinking everyone wants to hear their stupid fucking system there again. So anyway, what was I saying then? Oh yeah, the price of stuff. So yeah, so you have the price of AKs on both ends basically being like twice the price of what an AR is now, is what it is. And that was the big thing back in, like I would say like Sandy Hook time period, so like pre 2012. There was only a couple AR manufacturers on the market at the time there, and it was mostly because of the assault weapons ban that 94 is what it is, because you had this whole decade of time where you had companies like High Point basically become a thing, and that was when they started making their 10-round rifles back in the day, and haven't stopped to this day actually. And so what you end up having then is you had some things because of restrictions creating certain companies or certain pieces of a companies what it is there. But then you had all these other companies that should have been able to manufacture a bunch of stuff for civilian use, but because it had various features that the government didn't like on it, or it was, didn't have a pin and welded thing on it, or had the fucking, what was it? It's like a bayonet lug or some bullshit like that. That's what they put on there. It's like a feature to ban some of this stuff. It's so fucking ridiculous. And this is all like Dianne Feinstein types that were doing this crap at the time. Obviously, Chuck Schumer was involved. That's the one thing too. So you had Feinstein, you had Schumer, you had Pelosi, Waters. So it was those four Democrats, and I believe I think Marcy Kaptur was another one as well that voted yes on this bullshit in '94 because they were all in power then, and most of them are still in power today, except for Feinstein, who obviously died in the last few years. There, what it is. But the interesting thing is, and this is something going back to the conversation I with you of a few years back now, is what it is. He was actually telling me an interesting thing, which is that about 95 or so percent, I think is what it was, of the various Democrats and rhinos that voted for the AWB in '94, between the '96 election cycle and 2000 or so election cycle, they were all voted out of office then. So it's interesting to note that, because at the same time, yet you still had that piece of shit unconstitutional legislation being upheld in the court of laws, what it is then. Even though all those people that voted for it were kicked out of office after the fact because people were rightfully pissed about their gun rights being taken from them, and as they should have been, So, and again, going back to this kind of stuff right now is exactly why I'm a gunner here in 2026 and why I'm a 2A advocate here in 2026, because And it's exactly why I also have, multiple gun rights groups that I am the founder and director of, is what it is here. We got High Patriot Education Network 2022, Ohio's Firearms Freedom 2021, which is basically what we use to get constitutional carry here. That's now under the umbrella of Open. Then I created TPEN, Texas Patriot Education Network, in 2024, which I'm still talking to people now, 2 years later, to actually be boots on the ground in Texas there for us and basically be our leadership teams there, is what it is then. So, which I'm like probably that close right now to getting 2 dudes on board that we're going to use to do that stuff. And then there obviously would get one of our TPEN hats that would be kind of like the High Patriot Education Network hat, except for, say, Texas Patriot Education Network across it then. So that's also why I bought one for myself then as well. We would use that one as our, what do you call it now? Not really moniker per se, but template. That's what it is. We would use that as a template and then probably just do like different colorations of the wording and stuff like that. What it is then, because making these hats right here are not cheap, dude. This, like, the baseline hat itself is like, I think $12 or something, and then it was like $8 to put the patch on there with the writing on it then. So it was all said and done, it was like 20, I think it was either $20 or $21 or something like that for this hat, which is just ridiculous because it should be about a $15 hat at max. So, but that's, again, the scumbag ass fucking printing on demand that I was able to find that on Amazon, what it is then. And they're all like that, basically, where they charge you, it's an individual price per hat, and then it's also, they will charge you individual delivery for the thing, even though you could have like 50 fucking hats being delivered to the same exact address, they're still going to try and charge you, like, I think it's like $6 or $7 per delivery. So it's just so fucking ridiculous with them. So I need to find one that doesn't do it, obviously, if I'm going to do like mass stuff or something with it. But anyway, the entire point of the matter I'm making, though, is there was a time period in history, obviously, pre-2010s, where because the AWB, you really didn't have a whole lot of AR companies on the market. You had Colt, you had a couple other ones like that. And then, since then you had a bunch of other manufacturers now making everything. And now you have companies like Delta Team Tactical, you got companies like PSA, et cetera, out there that will make full firearms. They'll make uppers, they'll make lowers, et cetera, for you to buy. And then you got companies like One Horse that have now taken over for where Anderson used to be at before it was bought up by Ruger. There is what it is in the quote unquote poverty pony game, to where you could just build out from their lowers as it is then. And yeah, they're both good companies, obviously. And it just sucks to know that Anderson is now no longer existing, because they were basically the standard bearer for a lot of people's builds. You would have, it would be just that Anderson strip lower that somebody would use, and they would build out from there. Maybe you buy a mil-spec parts kit, maybe you buy some various other things for it, maybe you put a little bit of different furniture on, is what it is there. Maybe you get different butt stock than the regular A2, maybe you get different pistol grip than the regular A2, which I don't understand how those are the fucking standard go-tos at this point. I'm guessing probably military would be my guess, because a lot of that stuff is used in military services with us then. But even those guys that are smart about it, they'll be like, okay, let me get a different butt stock for this. Let me, pimp this out if I can, so it is there, because obviously those are like the operator types of it is then. It's not the, like baseline Army infantry or baseline Marines or whatever the case be there. It's like your specialized TAC teams and stuff like that. They'll go out there. The guys that were, trying to think what I would call them now. I forget exactly what the configuration of names are right now. My mind's blank because I'm just so tired of what it is. But yeah, it would basically be the guys that, like the dude that Chris Pratt portrayed in the Terminalists show. It would be guys like that, basically, that would be able to pimp out their shit with what it is then, with various good stuff on it then. Because they're going to be going in there and doing, like, crazy missions and shit like that, where they would need to have it be configured to their own, personal specs and shit. It can't just be some like basic bitch grab off the fucking wall kind of thing as it is there from the armory. It's got to be like their specific build or whatever then. So that's like the same exact thing with various military snipers. They get to basically build out their own rifles, what it is there, to their own specifications and everything. And at the end of the day, it's going to be because they're the ones making the shot. They're the ones taking out the, targets. They're the ones taking down the threats, is what it is, from distances and stuff, whether it be, a quarter of a mile or whether it be a full mile or so out with some of these long distance shots. So anyway, but yeah, basically it's just a preference thing, is what it is there. And for me personally, I do not like A2 stocks at all. Mostly I think it's because with my arthritis and my joints and stuff like that, and the fact that it's lacking a butt pad, it's a big deal for me, obviously. Now granted, you can go and buy like butt pad cover things that basically are just a big piece of rubber you can put over the actual A2 stock. It makes it look kind of fucked up after it's all said and done and put in place there, but they're not that expensive. But the thing is, like, would I rather buy one of those, or would I rather pay roughly about the same amount of money and just get a different kind of stock entirely for that looks way more badass as what it is then, and feels better on the shoulder and stuff like that, because it's already got like a piece of rubber butt pad literally built into it, is what it is there. So yeah, I'd much rather have the second option there, is what it is. But anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and I think call it a day on that one. But yeah, what needs to be said though is that at one point there was a time where AK was king, and it was that short little 5, 6, 7 year window right after the AWB expired then. And then it was not long after that then where you then had a bunch of companies be coming about and coming to fruition and being, begin like mass manufacturing and stuff like that, that basically now led to AR-15 is the go-to standard for most American firearms owners in this country for a rifle. And it's because you can buy it cheaper, you can get cheaper ammo, and if you need to, arm a bunch of people, you can build a bunch of them out actually in a very quick succession for a lot cheaper than it would be to build a bunch of AKs at this point, honestly. So anyway, now granted, that being said, if we're talking about stopping power though, yeah, the AK is going to be a better stopping power firearm though, and it's mostly because several reasons. Obviously, it's a more powerful round, it's a larger grain weight on the round. It's about twice the grain weight of what a 5.56 would be. And there's been demonstrations done over the years. There's actually a good, I don't know if the video still exists on YouTube, here's what it is or not, but there was one video I saw years and years ago. It's probably about somewhere between like 7 and 10 years ago now, where it was somebody showing the differences between the penetrating ability of 5.56 versus 7.62. And it was basically them shooting a cinder block with a 5.56. And I think it was like either an entire mag or close to an entire mag was needed to basically make a small hole into the cinder block. Whereas they then took an AK and were shooting at a different cinder block. And it was like somewhere between like 3 and 5 rounds is what it took to basically demolish that cinder block into dust. So yeah, the penetration is immensely different, obviously. That being said, if we're talking about features and if we're talking about the ability to be able to modify firearms to your own various specifications, obviously ARs win that out no matter what, because if you go to the baseline AK, the gun that Kalashnikov himself made, there is what it is. Unless you're getting something that has
the ability to get like a rail mounting system on it and stuff like that. You don't have the ability for optics. You don't have the ability for weapons lights. You don't have the ability for a lot of stuff you might need. Versus with an AR, you can easily put all that stuff on a rail system there that it is. And, you know, when you're able to have a decent set of flip up sights and stuff like that, you can easily do iron sights on either or and get good at that stuff. You know, it's just a matter of practice is what it is there. And that's one thing I think going full circle back in this episode, back to Jordan Salinas, the hero of the in and out shooting. This is what people need to do. They need to practice more. They need to go to ranges. They need to be able to shoot better. They need to be able to go to an outdoor range where they can do drills and stuff like that and be able to know like angles and trajectories and stuff like that and be able to do proper shot placement, you know, because that's the thing. No criminal wants a thing to be a two-way range. They never want their criminal environment to be a two-way range. They want it to be a one-way range where they are the ones doing all the shooting and killing innocent people. Because it's as soon as you get that two-way range where people are firing back and not going to be the victim is when these cowards will pussy out and take their own lives because they're a bunch of fucking pussies. That is why not once in this episode have we mentioned the piece of crap shooter in the in-and-out shooting by name, and we never will because there's no reason to. I am making it a stance right now, today, August 7, 2026. Any massacre that takes place in the future in this country, we at Ohio Patriot Education Network will never name the shooter of that massacre because fuck those fucking cowards. They are all pieces of shit. And most of them are just fucking worthless assholes that are too chicken shit to just suicide in the fucking first place because they want fucking infamy. They want mainstream media coverage. They want everything that the media has given previous pieces of shit. And they think they can go to some place and rack up a fucking body count without armed resistance. It is time for that armed resistance to exist. It is time for the Armed Citizen Qualified Immunity Act 2026 to become reality. And you have armed citizens that are willing to shoot back, have the ability to have the exact same qualified immunity that police have in this country. And it's that simple. And the story. On that note, I will see you guys tomorrow, most likely for Freedom for Slicey Boy Saturday. I haven't done one in a while, but we're gonna do a little preview of something I got in here. Trying to figure out where that was. There it is. Yeah, I got a little preview of a new GTKII that we'll be discussing here in the next day or two, which comes in a little package here and is a nice little OTF. Nice little double-sided dagger there. So yeah, I'll be doing the specs on that in a couple of days as it is. I recently was able to pick that up for a decent price. I believe it was one of the 704 gear deals or something this week. Maybe it was last week, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's still going on or not, but it was under $30 though. So, and yeah, very nice knife, very sharp. I believe it is, I want to say D2, but I could be wrong about the steel quality on that one. I'll have to look into it again. But yeah, it's GTKI that makes that though. And really, I just wanted a cool ass OTF knife. And I've wanted a double-sided dagger type of knife for a while now, is what it is, which that basically fills both gaps as it is then. So anyway. See you, DJ. But yeah, on that note, I'm going to call it a day. I'm going to go make something to eat, and I'm probably going to take a short nap for a little bit since there's nothing really going on right now. My laundry should be done pretty quick here as it is. So, and thankfully it seems like the maintenance guys are done doing whatever the fuck they're doing, and either the dude that potentially moved out or the guy next to him, whichever place it is there. So I'm gonna hopefully be able to get like an afternoon nap in, and what it is, because yeah, that pissed me the fuck off this morning. I was sitting here sleeping in the recliner, and literally it was like 9:20, 9:30 this morning, something like that. All of a sudden I started hearing like this crazy fucking buzzing sound. It sounds like somebody's like trying to like cut through a fucking wall or something, and I'm just like, what the fuck is that? At first I thought it was them. At first I thought it was one of the people doing vacuuming, and then I realized after the fact, I think what it was is you had the kid there move out during the past 30 days. And I think it was one of the maintenance guys coming in there and using a sawzall to cut up some stuff that was all fucked up or whatever. And they were trying to redo some stuff in there. I think that's what the hammering was, actually. I think it was them trying to fix some cabinetry or something over there is what it is then. So, but anyway, either way, hopefully I'm going to find a new place here in the next couple months then, and I'll be out of here sometime in October or November, I'm hoping. But I don't know if I'll have a new neighbor by then or not, or what's going to go on there. But you know, one time will tell. I'm like I said, I'm pretty sure that this kid moved out though, because I noticed here in like the past, like somewhere between like I guess technically it'll be about a week into to August now, so it'll be probably about maybe the last 3 weeks or so. So it'd been like mid July is the last time I really remember hearing anybody over there then. So it's been very quiet since then. I don't really think too much of it. I just thought maybe the dude's schedule got switched around or something like that then. But yeah, I think he just moved out is what it was. So it's been potentially empty for a couple of weeks now is what it is then. So I really just wish my landlord wouldn't just be such a fucking absentee dude or whatever right now, because it would be nice to have him like, you know, text up and be like, oh, by the way, we're sending maintenance out here because the other person that lived next to you moved out, and we're going to be doing a bunch of like work in there this morning. Like, it would have been nice to get that text last night, or any time for that matter, where they're like, oh, by the way, just to let you know, like, you might be hearing some loud ass noises in the morning from this stuff, instead of just getting woken, little ripped out of a fucking dead sleep, and are now like looking around like, what the fuck, you know, because you're so like groggy still is what it is. So yeah, it's just a bunch of bullshit is what it is then. So yeah, I'm gonna try to get a nap in then here in a few minutes. That's what it'll be, and go from there. Is what it'll be then. So anyway, y'all have a good one. Stay safe, stay vigilant, always be caring, always be situationally aware, etc., etc. And make sure that if something does happen, that you are the Jordan Salinas type of society, to where you are willing to engage an active threat and deal with that active threat if you need to. Because as we've seen, most of these people that commit these massacres are total cowards. And the second that, you know, some hot blood goes whizzing by their ass, they will pussy out and run like little bitches, what it is. And almost always they will opt out when confronted. So usually by their own hands, which is exactly what this piece of crap in and out did then. He pussied out, ran to wherever the fuck, and then pulled a secondary weapon and just self-deleted is what it was then. So anyway, good riddance. Hopefully he's rotting in hell right now. That's something to say about that one. So till later. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Y'all have a good rest of your Friday. And like I said, I'll be back either tomorrow or Sunday with a new Slicey Boy episode. That's what it is. So until then, stay safe. Have a good one. Later.